All right, friends, we're going to do a video about core cards because this is one of the things that people have requested from me probably more than anything else. And it's been a journey for me, and I have notes, guys, which I never have, like a grown-up vlogger and not just some off-the-cuff rando. Off-the-cuff rando is the name of my new band. So look, let's talk about the core cards, okay? Why do the core cards freak us out? Honestly, I think that it's a combination of not having a strong system for them and just that we've been told over and over and over again that they're difficult. You know, I think to a degree there's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that comes into play with the core cards. But there is a degree to which they are kind of confusing, right? Because they could be the person we're reading for, which could be us. They could be someone in their life. They could be an aspect of that person. They could be an aspect of someone in the, just they, like, are they me? Are they someone else in my life? Like, I'm just asking the same question different ways, so the notes aren't helping all that much. But you know what I mean. I don't like working this way. It's very like disorienting for me to have notes and to like look at you and things. But I do think that they make us panic, and a lot of readers struggle with this, and I think even after I started feeling confident with reading, it took me a minute before I understood how to read with the core cards. And I think there are some assumptions we have to make about the core cards, and the first is that I really do think that they are people. That said, they are not a complete portrait of anyone, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So I think in order to read with the core cards, or to make them make sense in a reading, there's some work that we have to do to understand what they really are. And let's kind of like just sort of let's neutralize everything we've ever learned about them for a second in order to make some sense out of what they are and kind of how they function. In this sort of quick little part of this video, in this talk of this section, I'm really just, full disclosure, I've been sick all week. This is the first day where I kind of feel human. And I'm like, let's make this video. And I'm also like, a little manic. I'm going to take a deep breath. We're going to have a sip of our decaf iced coffee. We're just going to like be okay. All right. So, to understand the court cards in tarot, let's divert from tarot for a second, and we'll go to one of my other systems that I use a lot. I probably get more requests for this than tarot readings, which is Sibylla. And Sibylla has a lot of people in them. There's a lot of people cards. And I think maybe that's one reason it's not as popular for folks, because with all these people, you have the priest, the doctor, the old woman, the wife. You've got the male enemy, the female enemy, the widower. You've got all these different people. And you don't, in Lenormand, for example, you have the man and the woman and the writer, and that's it, right? Sibylla has all these people. One reason why I actually really like Sibylla is that makes sense to me, that there's a lot of people in the deck. And how I read them is to consider what they are and what they represent. Like, one thing that I took away from studying Lenormand with Camellia Elias is she says, like, what's the function of the object? Like, what's the function of the symbol? Don't look at it in terms of its symbolism. What does a broom do? What does a scythe do? What's its function? And so with the people in Sibylla, I actually interpret it the same way. And so, for example, we have the priest. What's the function of a priest? What does a priest do? What does a priest represent? That is what the priest will do in the context of a reading. So it's like the priest card in Sibylla represents the idea of priestiness. And the wife card represents wifiness. What is that? Like, what does wifiness mean? What is a wife? And I try to interpret them from sort of a modern lens, but you don't have to. I mean, one of the things about these systems that we're working with is that they are very much a part of the zeitgeist, to use a really pretentious word, of the time that they came out of. And so, there's associations with wifiness that's maybe a little kind of politically like bleh, but that might make sense in a reading because that kind of thing happens. Like, what is a wife could be subjugated, for example. I tend to read the wife as like the partner of something or someone. Wives are partnered. You know, the idea of wifiness, wifery is impossible without marriage, without union, without partnership. So wives are the partner of, for example. A priest has qualities of priestiness. So that could be faithfulness, it could be zealotry, it could be counseling, it could be power. You know, so when I'm reading those people cards in Sibylla, I'm thinking about the idea of them as qualities of that person. A doctor has healing qualities. They have education. They have they charge money for what they do. So it's not just a healing act, it's healing for profit, for example. So I think about the function of the people in Sibylla in that way. And when they show up in a reading, I know that they kind of are an archetype of a thing, of an experience, which hopefully makes sense. The experience of priestiness, the experience of wifiness, the experience of being an enemy. And then there's all these like gendered things that go into it too that we won't get into here, but like why is the male enemy different from the female enemy, etc. Like there's all that, and the video really isn't about Sibylla, but what I'm trying to get at is like the cards, all of the cards, Sibylla, Tarot, whatever, are archetypes of experience. And so if you think about the major arcana in tarot, one of the ways that I have accessed them in the past is to think about them as the experience of deathiness. You know, what does this deathiness feel like? What is high priestess-ishness? That was hard to say. What's the experience of high priestess-ishness in the context of a reading? Right? What's deathiness? There's this quality of ending, of over, of grief, of darkness, of quietude, you know, the experience of death-like things. Right. Stay with me. So all of the cards kind of represent the experience of something. They represent the experience of tower-ishness. They represent the experience of hierophantishness. What is the experience of hierophantishness? It's similar probably to the priests in Sibylla. There's authority, power, religion, but the experience of being subjected or subjugated by, the experience of subjugating, the experience of lineage and history, of musty old churches, you know, of the glory of a cathedral, of building a cathedral. All of these are part of the hierophantishness experience. Hopefully that makes sense. All of what I just said, in its kind of muddled wisdom, it is wise, even if it doesn't sound like it, applies to the court cards. They are the same in that way. They have a function. Checking my notes, as I do, so I don't mess anything up. So they have a function. The page has a paginess. The knight has a knightiness. And there's actually this really kind of brilliant little system for the court cards because they have their function. They have their ishness, right? So we have queeniness, kinginess, knightiness, paginess, whatever sort of names you give them. And then there's that quality plus the quality of the element of the suit, right? So you have sort of like the page of cups is like paginess plus cuppiness equals the page of cups. And the knight of wands is knightiness plus wandsiness. I know that this sounds like baby talk, but we're getting somewhere. Which gives us the knight of wands. And so here's like the like where all this monologue is headed, right? The first thing you want to do in order to read the court cards really effectively is to understand what that paginess is. What is paginess? What is knightiness? What is queeniness? Like, what is that feeling, that experience, that function of the card, of the role, the job of that card? And you will arrive at different answers. There are different systems of this. I tend to view the court cards as sort of literally as I can, because that just makes them easy to remember in terms of their function. But what I've tried to do over the years is distance myself from gender stereotypes, which are hard to escape in tarot because they're all over it. You know, the Empress and the Emperor are in essence the stereotypes of masculinity and femininity and binariness, which is a struggle for us in modern life because we understand that these sort of dualities are more complicated than once upon a time they were, or at least they seemed to the powers that made them, the hierophantishness. So I've evolved in my thinking of the function of each, but I don't resent the royalty, the sort of monarchical overtones of them. I've learned to live and work with them. So for me, paginess is an experience of curiosity, an experience of studentiness. You know, it's the experience of what a page literally is. So a page is learning to be a knight, and they are in service to the knight. So they're not just a student, they are also in service to. So those are qualities, those are experiences. That's the sort of archetypal story represented by the page. A knight is sort of a journeyman. They're a hunter. They go in search of adventure. They go fight the wars. They're fighters, hunters. They're hunter-gatherers. That's kind of the experience of knightiness. Queens and kings, I feel like a lot of folks struggle with, well, what's really different about them? And how do we delineate between the two so that each has a function, but at the same time, it's not like queens are moms, And so where I have landed in this regard is that queens represent the facilitation of an act. They make room for, they make space for, they enable, they achieve, they facilitate whatever their element is. It's sort of a more neutral nurturing. Like nurturing was my key word for that for a long time, and I just didn't like that queens are still rulers. Queens are queens. They're not, the nanny. They're not like, they're still rulers. I said that twice. And so what did that do? Like I had to sort of reconcile that for myself. And so that's where like the phone ended my video. So anyway, I had to think about the queens as something other than just like moms, because that's not what they are. And so facilitation is like, to me, like being the editor at a magazine, being an agent, being a corporate, an intellectual property lawyer or a manager of talent. You know what I mean? They go out into the world and they do the things. And then the king kind of embodies the suit. They represent kind of the fullness of experience for what it's worth. So that's how I've come to see them. You can see them however you want to, but I think the main thing is that if you don't have that basic structure, if you don't have that basic sense of like, here's what kingishness is, then you're gonna struggle because you don't have a foundation to work with. And I think where a lot of folks fall down with the court cards is that they don't even have that function or that foundation, and they just kind of play fast and loose and kind of hope like maybe the court cards will play nice and I'll just figure it out. But I think unless you have a bounding box for them to live in, it makes your job a lot harder. So that's sort of the beginning of the conversation. Let's look at our notes so that we don't miss important, brilliant pieces of information. So I think the other thing to think about too is like there's a tendency in the tarot world to identify as one of the court cards, which is fine. I think that actually is a great thing to start doing, to understand the cards, to understand the behaviors and qualities of the court cards. I think that's like the beginning of understanding the functions. To like, I'm a Queen of Swords because I display these qualities. And I think actually a really good thing to do is just sort of like go through all your friends or go through famous people and sort of say that person's Queen of Swords, that person's King of Wands. But I think it's also helpful to remember that nobody is one court card. Like, it is not the totality of a person. It is the essence of energy or qualities of a piece of a person. And so we have all of the court cards in us. It's like when a court card is in a reading, it's sort of like, what's the dominant energy in the reading that matters most right now? What is the qualities of this person that are bubbling up and are either needed in this situation if it's an advice spread, or that are causing issues, or whatever the case is? Like, what are the dominant traits that are at play in this particular situation? So that's one thing to think about, is that it's not enough to say that I'm the Queen of Wands. We're more than that. The Queen of Wands is maybe dominant energy in a given moment, but it's not the totality of who we are. And I guess this is kind of a footnote, but I've started to think in terms of astrology, and sort of, if you think about how we all have a sun sign, a rising sign, and a moon. And I have very limited experience with astrology, but just to kind of sort of like boil it down, it's like the sun sign kind of represents who we are, particularly how people see us. The moon represents how we engage in the world emotionally. And the rising sign represents how we exist in the world and how we want to sort of be seen. And so I kind of feel like we might have like a court card that's our sun card, our moon card, and our rising card, so like I might be like a King of Swords sun, a Queen of Pentacles moon, and a like Knight of Wands rising, for example, but I'm even sort of like, I'm more than that, and I just say that because I want us to understand that it's more than just like, this doesn't just represent the totality of who we are. We all have color, we all have shades. But I guess the reason why it matters for our purposes here is to understand that what we're really doing is we're looking at dominant traits. We're looking at qualities that are bubbling to the surface, or that are influencing the situation right now more than the rest of who we are. These qualities may be the solution to the situation. They may be the cause of the situation. It depends on the context, but we are more than just one court card. All right, so I think we're ready to get into like the meat of things. So all of that said, what do we know about court cards so far? We know that they're people. We know that they're aspects of people, and that they have a function and a form that tells us how they behave and what they're doing. So now let's talk about a reading. Again, there's no hard and fast rule about when a court card represents the person we're reading for, whether that's us or someone in their life. And there are readers out there who just don't have, like the court cards are always the person that they're reading for. There's no time when it's not the querent, for example. So it's always the person that you're reading for, and it's some aspect of them or aspects of them if there's more than one. I don't hold that to be true in my experience, in part because I think we are so impacted by the people in our lives. We're constantly responding to and being responded to, like we're symbiotic. We're always engaged with one another. And so there are times when we are represented in the reading as a court card, and there are times when other people might be. That's a more nuanced view of how to read with the court cards. It's also harder because how do you know who's who? How do you know whether the court card represents someone in the person's life or the person themselves? And that's where people start to get freaked out. So I'm going to show you some ways that you can figure that out kind of easily. All right. So once again, checking my notes. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples, and I always think that doing like a question with cards helps a lot. So here's a scenario that I created, right? So I'm a stay-at-home mom who loves my family and loves what I do, but I'm starting to feel like my light is being stifled a little bit. I also feel like my husband could do more when he's not at work to make space for me to do things for myself, but I get that he's tired too. Something isn't working right, and I know it needs to be fixed, but I don't know what to do. Okay, So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just think about what we know about our querent and sort of their relationship to the court cards. So, like, what are court cards that could represent this woman based on what we know of her, this stay-at-home mom, right? There could be, what I wrote here was she views herself as a Queen of Pentacles, probably, maybe a Queen of Cups, maybe a Knight of Cups, because she's got that sort of like creative desire to go and sort of journey and be romantic, you know what I mean, about her life. Now, I don't think she thinks of herself this way unless she's also a tarot reader, but she might. But like when she describes herself, she's kind of describing herself as a Queen of Pentacles, Queen of Cups, sort of motherly caretaker of others, who loves what she does, but like maybe wants a little bit more. All right. And so what I said here was like, so I know that about her because I know what she's told me about her situation. I can gather, my intellect and say, okay, yeah, she's got these qualities of the Queen of Pentacles, or the Queen of Cups. And so if those come up in the reading, they're probably her, right? Because those are the qualities that are represented by what she told us about herself. But what if other court cards come up? Like if it's not one of those queens, and I'm being very, very basic just for this example, but if it's not the Queen of Pentacles, say, is it automatically her husband or her kids? Or how do we know that it's not an aspect of her that isn't fully manifested right now, or maybe that she needs to manifest, or what? Like, how do I know whether if the King of Wands shows up, it's her or her husband or someone else? And that's where people start to panic, because it makes sense if the Queen of Pentacles shows up, but if she doesn't, like, what's going on? And so this is where we use context. All right. So let's say that we draw the Queen of Pentacles, the Sun, and the Five of Pentacles. Like in that case, it's probably pretty clear that she's the Queen of Pentacles, right? Because we already know that she has those Queen of Pentacles-like qualities about her. But what if it's the King of Pentacles, the Sun, and the Five of Pentacles? Like, who does the King represent in that case? And so we're going to kind of like dance this out together, and I'm going to show you how I land on an answer. And you might come up with a different answer, of course, because you're a different reader, but the point isn't so much that you get the same results that I did, but that you see how I got where I did, right? So anytime we want to figure out what's going on in a reading, we have to figure out who's doing what and how. And so with the King of Pentacles, the Sun, and the Five of Pentacles, what do we know? What is the King doing in this reading? Sorry, it's like, this is why I hate working with notes. Guys, I'm such a poor thing. Yeah. So, King of Pentacles, what is the King doing in this reading? Like, what aspects or behaviors is he exhibiting? The other cards can tell us that, right? So, we have vulnerable people in the snow, in the Five of Pentacles, right? So they're like out there, they're shivering, OMG, it's cold, I'm dying, it's the end of the world. And then we have the Sun. And so, sorry, again, just read my notes. Like, we're just going to have to accept that I'm reading my notes. Take that, me. So the King of Pentacles, the Sun is protecting and creating warmth. So the King of Pentacles in this case is protecting these young, innocent little things from cold by making a warm space for them. So the King is serving in a sense as a parent. And so in this case, the King of Pentacles is probably still mom in this reading, even though it's a king and not a queen, right? Because it doesn't matter what the gender of the monarch is in the court cards. It represents it matters what they're doing and how. And so the King of Pentacles in this spread with these three cards probably means that the King of Pentacles is still mom, serving in that protective role, making a warm space so that these vulnerable innocents don't get frozen to death. We're done with this page of notes. So now, let's say it's the Page of Cups and the Sun and the Five. So we change one card, we change everything. But now we look at who the page might be. How do we know who the page is? Like, is it one of her kids? Is it her husband? What's what? So who is the page? What is the page doing? How do we know this? Well, what do pages do? What's the function of a page? They study, and this page is studying the other two cards, right? So the page is sort of thinking about and considering the sun and the Five of Pentacles, and he's curious, and he's looking at the warmth of the sun and the cold of the five. He's not engaged, though. Like, he's not doing anything, because pages don't really. Pages are probably the most passive of the lot, because they're curious, they're young, and they're sort of like, huh, what's that? They're not active. They're not knights. So he's not running into the scene. He's just seeing it. He cares about it, but he doesn't fully understand it. So he's like, I'm the Page of Cups. Like, I care about this. This is curious. I see this situation. I don't kind of get it, but I know it's there, and it's making me feel something. So in that case, to me, it makes me feel like the husband who kind of knows something isn't right, but isn't quite sure because he doesn't get it. And so in that case, in this scenario, just by changing the card, the Page of Cups seems to be the husband, because he's someone who sees it and is like, oh, yeah, that's a thing. I don't fully understand it, though, and I don't know what's going on. Which, based on what I know about the husband from the question, feels kind of right. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't get that she needs more help when he gets home from work. He doesn't get that she needs time to herself. Like, he gets home and he's like, I'm tired. And she's like, I get that, but I also worked all day, and so in that case, I feel like the Page of Cups is the husband who just doesn't see the situation clearly. All right. See where we're going with this? Like, the way that the cards behave, what they're doing and what they're looking at and how they're engaging with each other is kind of how you know who the court card might be in a reading. And it, again, like context. It is all because of the way the cards are working together or not, where they're looking, where they're going, what they're doing, what their function is, and how they engage with the other cards in the spread. And this is, again, one reason why I really, really, really do not like one-card readings, because we wouldn't get any of this. If I just asked a question and flipped over the Page of Cups, like, I don't have any of this to work with. But because I have 3 cards, at least in this case, I have a whole world. I have a page who's sort of considering the situation and saying, I'm the Page of Cups. I care about things, but I'm a page. I don't super understand it. I'm kind of a dumb husband, for example. All right. So where are we? That's probably her husband. So what if we change the cards and we get this spread, right? The Knight of Swords, the Sun, and the Page of Cups. So now we have 2 court cards, the Knight of Swords and the Page of Cups, and we still have the Sun. So we have 2 courts. Are they both the same people? Are they different people? Oh my God, I want to quit tarot reading. This is really hard. Ugh. How do I know? So what are they doing? All right. Like, again, we just study the spread. So the page is looking down toward this, or the page is looking toward the sun. Okay, so he sees the warmth, and he's also seeing the Knight of Swords race off to do his own thing. So he's sort of seeing like, oh, here's this golden glow around this knight who's going off and knighting. He just looks on. He can't do anything because he's not ready. He's just a page. Like, he can't go be a knight yet. The Knight of Swords gets to go off and be all swordsy, while the page stays home with the fish. The knight runs away from the warmth to go off and do his hunting and his knighting, and the page stays home and sort of sustains that warmth and takes care of the fish. And so in this case, I would say that the page is mom and the knight is dad, based on what I know about the situation. The page stays home and takes care of the fish, creates a warm space. The knight goes off, has the golden glow of adventure, comes home. The page can't do the things the page wants to do because they're not ready. In this case, not ready really means that they're just sort of bound by their situation while the knight goes off and knights. Again, this is not to say like, this is not a value judgment on stay-at-home parenting. It's just an easy exploration of who's doing what in tarot, right? Boom. So everything we know about the court cards, everything we know about who's who comes from the combination of things. In the question, everything I know and can gather from the question, everything I know and can gather from the cards on the table in front of me. And again, you may come up with a different answer for who's who, but the point isn't so much that we get the same answer. It's that you see kind of how I'm teasing this out, how I'm figuring out who is who and why. And that, as always, you're able to kind of justify your choice somehow. And that's the thing that I feel like I talk about a lot, and I think it really matters because you will feel more confident if you're able to go back and say, this page of cups in this case is the mom because, and here's the evidence in the reading. And that's just going to make you feel more confident. So what about this mess? Page of Cups, Knight of Swords, Queen of Wands. 3 freaking court cards, guys. Like, OMG. All right, so once again, we just take a deep breath and we think about who's doing what, all right? So what's happening in this spread? The knight runs to the page, right? So knights are pages' bosses and mentors, basically. The knight is racing off to share his wisdom with the page. The page is looking off dreamily, thinking about his feelings. The queen is looking toward the future and her creative passions. What can she make? What can she do? How can she manifest? How can she facilitate the fire in her to do the things that she loves to do? The knight goes to take care of the page, who obviously won't be long for this world if he doesn't pay attention. The knight is smart and he knows this, and the queen is dreaming about sunflowers. So I think these are all the mom, representing different aspects of her life right now. These are the 2 parts of her life, having to take care of the kids and sustain her dreams and goals for the future. The page could be her kids, but I think it's probably her romantic dreams, like her sense of optimism and potential and curiosity in this case that the knight has to take care of and sustain while being the knight and fending for everyone's lives. But that feeds the Queen of Wands so that she can sort of sustain this feeling, this interest she has in making down the line and doing things that matter to her. So again, like these are they're very simple examples. It's not a real reading, but like hopefully you can kind of see the way that we're able to tease out who's who just by like looking at the cards, the qualities of the courts, the function of the courts, and how they are acting in the spread, what they're doing, who they're doing it with, how they're doing it. And all of that we know just from the qualities of the courts, the other cards in the spread, the functions that we've identified with the court cards. It's just looking at the cards and seeing what they're doing and listening to them and listening to the way they dance together and experimenting and asking myself, what's what? Let's try one more before I wrap up this sort of hopefully helpful but very convoluted video. So let's say this one, right? So the question is, my boss hates me and I don't know what to do about it. What do I do? Okay, so not as much detail as we had in the first question. This one is much less contextual. But there are still some things I can learn about this person or assume about them from the question and the way they phrased it, right? So the question was, my boss hates me and I don't know what to do about it. What do I do? And things I can gather about this person is that they view themselves as subservient. They feel insecure. They feel powerless. They feel unappreciated and unloved. Their boss might be a jerk. They perceive the whole situation negatively, and they don't really take any ownership for any of it. Like, my boss hates me. Like, maybe, but like, have you done anything to make them hate you? Like, are you lazy? We don't know. But we do know that they view themselves as the victim of the situation. All right. So we draw 3 cards. Boom. And in this case, we get the Ace of Wands, the Queen of Swords, and the 2 of Cups. Okay. So the goal, again, is to figure out who that Queen of Swords is. So who's the Queen of... you know what? I wrote Queen of Swords and Queen of Wands. It's the Queen of Swords. I remember. It's Queen of Swords because she's got the sword up. So what's she doing? It actually looks like she's blessing the union of 2 people. You know, she has the power to bless this union. She's authorized to do it. And where does that power come from? Like, this is interesting. Power only comes from people who are willing to give you that power. Like, power without power being accepted isn't power. So in essence, like, the Queen of Swords is elevated because these 2 of Cups allow this power, you know, to happen. But power is only powerful if it's obeyed. Anyway, that was a note. So the Queen of Swords has the power to bless this union or to cut it off. And they also have a big old stick behind their back that they can bring out and, like, club you to death with it if they need to. So the Queen of Swords in this case is probably the boss. You know, there's just that level of power and authority there to sort of bless or cut or do anything. And I'm not even worried right now about the answer to the question. I'm just figuring out who the Queen of Swords is here. And the Queen of Swords is probably the boss because they are invested with that level of power. They are able to sort of bless this union or cut it. Let's say it changes. Let's have the King of Wands, the Two of Cups, and the Five of Cups. Who's the King of Wands in that case? And I think in that case, the King of Wands, here he is turning his back on this relationship that makes him sad, just to sort of look at the Two of Cups and the Five of Cups that way. And so in essence, this is a King of Wands who's taking his power back from a relationship that isn't making him feel good, this union that hasn't worked, that makes him sad. And so in this case, the King of Wands is probably the querent because they're taking their power back and getting out of or turning away from this relationship that hasn't served them. So that is a very long, but hopefully clear, hopefully experiential way to explore who's who and how you know how a court card is functioning in a reading, who it's functioning as, why, and being able to justify it. So just to recap, the court cards, like the People in Sibylla and even like the Trumps, have a function, they have a job. And in a reading, they function by doing that job, by having the experience of paginess. So what does a page do? What is the pagey experience? What is a knighty experience? And then it's just a matter of kind of figuring out how they dance together and teasing out information from the reading based on what you know in the question and based on the other cards in the spread. And which is really just like reading any other card, So hopefully this helps you kind of relax into the process. This is absolutely something you can practice with sample readings. And the more you do it and the more you're able to kind of justify who is who and why, the more confident you're going to feel. And it's going to be less terrifying when those court cards come up. Even if you get a spread of like 9 court cards, it's totally possible. You can then figure out how these things are working together. And I really do think the courts are kind of an elegant system. You have the rank and their function, and then you have the way that function is exhibited in the element. So Knight of Cups is someone who hunts for cups, who hunts for love and relationship and feeling and sensation and all of those things. I hope this helps. Hopefully it did. Hopefully it wasn't too crazy. And let me know. Let me know how it goes for you. Be well.